What if the biggest gold story of the year isn't the price at all? What if it's something almost nobody is watching, happening quietly inside the vaults of a central bank on the other side of the world? Because here's the strange part. Gold just went through one of its worst quarters in over a decade. It fell from a record high above $5,500 an ounce, all the way down toward $4,000. Headlines called it a crash. Investors called it a warning sign. And yet, during the exact month gold was falling the hardest, one buyer was doing the opposite of what everyone expected. That buyer wasn't a hedge fund. It wasn't a retail investor scrolling their phone at midnight. It was China's central bank. And what it did in June may end up being remembered as one of the most important financial signals of 2026. If you're interested in money, investing, gold, silver, and protecting your financial future, subscribe to Money Insights and like this video. Because every week we break down the biggest financial stories in simple English, without the jargon and without the hype. Let's start with the number that got everyone's attention. Gold peaked in January 2026 above $5,500 an ounce, a record high driven by years of inflation, central bank buying, and a weakening trust in the US dollar as the world's only safe harbor. Then came the reversal. Rising bond yields, a stronger dollar, and a sudden rush back into technology stocks pulled money out of gold at a pace not seen since 2013. By July, gold was trading in a tight range near $4,000 an ounce, down roughly a quarter from its peak. For a metal that spent years being called unstoppable, that kind of drop made a lot of people nervous. Here's why that matters to you, even if you don't own a single gram of gold. Gold isn't just a shiny metal traded by wealthy investors, it's a mirror. It reflects what governments, central banks, and institutions actually believe about the future of money, inflation, and the US dollar, often long before that belief shows up in your grocery bill or your paycheck. When gold moves this violently, it usually means something underneath the surface is shifting. The question is what? Now here's where the story gets interesting, because the price chart only tells you what traders were doing. It doesn't tell you what governments were doing. And those are two very different stories right now. On July 7th, 2026, China's State Administration of Foreign Exchange quietly released a number that most people scrolled straight past. China's central bank, the People's Bank of China, had added another 93 tons of gold to its reserves in June. That's roughly 480,000 troy ounces. On its own, that might sound like a routine update, but look closer, and the timing becomes almost impossible to ignore. This wasn't just another monthly purchase. It was the largest single month of buying since October 2023. And it happened to be the 20th consecutive month that China's central bank had added to its gold reserves. The longest documented streak since comparable records began around 2015. 20 months, not 20 days. 20 months of uninterrupted accumulation, through rallies, through corrections, through geopolitical shocks, through every twist in this year's story. Picture that vault for a second. Rows of gold bars, stacked and cataloged, growing month after month, regardless of what the ticker on Wall Street says. That image alone tells you something markets often forget. Central banks don't trade the way you and I do. A reserve manager in Beijing isn't looking at the same screen as a futures trader in Chicago, wondering if gold will be higher tomorrow morning. They're answering an entirely different question. Will this asset protect national wealth over the next 20, 30, even 50 years? That's not speculation, that's allocation. And it explains why China kept buying aggressively even as gold suffered its worst quarterly decline since 2013, the same stretch of time ordinary investors were selling in fear. Here's a fact most people miss entirely, and it might be the most important piece of context in this whole story. Even after adding gold every single month for nearly 2 years, gold still makes up less than 10% of China's total foreign reserves. Compare that to many Western central banks, where gold can represent close to 70% of official reserves. That gap isn't a rounding error. It's a structural imbalance that could take decades to close if China's strategy continues at anything close to its current pace. Think about what that really means. If China wanted to bring its gold allocation even partway toward Western levels, it wouldn't need to buy for a few more months. It could need to buy for years, possibly through multiple economic cycles, multiple Fed chairs, and multiple price corrections, just like the one we just witnessed. This is why analysts increasingly describe China's gold buying not as a market call, but as a long-term reserve rebalancing program, one that operates on an entirely different clock than the headlines you see every day. And China isn't acting alone. According to the World Gold Council's 2026 Central Bank Gold Reserve Survey, 89% of central banks worldwide expect official gold reserves to increase over the next 12 months. 45% said they personally expect their own institutions' holdings to rise, the highest percentage ever recorded in the survey's history. Picture that. As a quiet global current, dozens of vaults on different continents, all moving in the same direction, almost invisible to the average investor scrolling through daily price charts. Now, why would so many central banks want more gold at the same time interest rates are elevated and gold pays no yield at all? That question takes us into the second half of this story, and it's where things get genuinely complicated. But before we go there, it helps to step back and ask a different question. Has anything like this happened before? History actually offers a useful comparison. In the 1970s, as the United States broke away from the gold standard and inflation spiraled into double digits, gold went through a similar pattern of sharp rallies, followed by brutal corrections, all while some central banks quietly rebuilt their reserves in the background. Then again in 2008, during the global financial crisis, gold initially fell alongside stocks before central bank buying and safe haven demand helped push it into one of its strongest multi-year rallies in modern history. Neither of those episodes moved in a straight line. Both were defined by exactly the kind of volatility investors are living through right now. History doesn't repeat itself perfectly, and nobody can say with certainty that today's pattern will resolve the same way. But it's a useful reminder that sharp corrections inside long-term gold cycles are not new, and they are not automatically a sign that an underlying trend has broken. Since March 2026, this conflict has been driven by escalating tension around the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important oil choke points on Earth. Iran restricted movement through the strait, and the United States responded with a sustained military campaign, prompting further retaliation from Iran-aligned forces in the region, including reported strikes on tankers near Saudi Arabia. Every escalation pushed energy prices higher, and higher energy prices feed almost directly into inflation. That's not a coincidence you can ignore. In May 2026, U.S. inflation came in at 4.2% year over year, its highest level in 3 years, driven largely by energy costs. Imagine a family filling up their car, watching the number on the gas pump climb, then watching their grocery bill do the same thing a few weeks later. That's inflation, not as an abstract statistic, but as a lived experience for millions of households. And that single data point flipped the entire market narrative for 2026. At the start of the year, many economists expected the Federal Reserve to keep cutting interest rates. Instead, inflation came back, and the conversation shifted almost overnight from rate cuts to potential rate hikes. That shift matters enormously for gold, because gold pays no interest or dividend. When interest rates rise, or even when markets simply expect them to rise, investors can earn a safer, guaranteed return elsewhere, which historically pulls some money away from gold. That's part of why gold fell as sharply as it did earlier this year, even while central banks kept buying underneath the surface. There's another thread worth noticing here too, one that rarely gets mentioned in the same breath as central bank gold buying. Silver, gold's quieter sibling, has been dealing with its own imbalance, driven not by central banks but by factories. Silver is used heavily in solar panels, electronics, and industrial manufacturing, and global demand for those uses has consistently outpaced new mine supply in recent years, creating a structural deficit that behaves very differently from gold's story. Where gold moves on trust, currency, and central bank policy, silver moves on real-world industrial consumption alongside its role as a monetary metal. The two markets are related, often moving in the same broad direction, but they are responding to different underlying pressures. It's a useful reminder that precious metals are not one single story. There are several overlapping stories, and understanding the difference matters if you're trying to make sense of the headlines rather than just react to them. This brings us to the person at the center of the next chapter of this story, a person most casual investors couldn't name, but whose words are now moving markets. Kevin Warsh became the new chair of the Federal Reserve earlier this year, taking over during one of the most uncertain economic stretches in recent memory. At his very first meeting as chair in June, the Federal Open Market Committee held interest rates steady in a range of 3.50 to 3.75%. On paper, that sounds uneventful, but look at what accompanied that decision, and the picture changes completely. The Fed's own projections, known as the dot plot, revealed something remarkable. 9 of 18 policymakers indicated they now expect at least one interest rate hike before the end of 2026. Just months earlier, essentially none of them were projecting a hike at all. That's not a subtle shift in sentiment. That's a genuine reversal in direction, unfolding in real time, in the middle of a year that began with expectations pointing the opposite way. And in a detail that caught the attention of economists everywhere, Warsh chose not to submit his own personal rate projection at all, breaking from the tradition of previous Fed chairs. Analysts have described this as part of a broader effort by Warsh to reduce forward guidance and keep markets guessing about the Fed's next move, rather than signaling decisions in advance. Whether you see that as refreshing honesty about uncertainty or as a new source of market anxiety may depend on your own view of how central banks should communicate. Reasonable people disagree on this point. Then, on July 1st, speaking at the European Central Banks Forum on Central Banking in Sintra, Portugal, Warsh delivered a short but pointed message. He said, in effect, that prices remain too high, and that inflation running above the Fed's 2% target is not something the central bank is willing to accept as normal. He offered no promises about what would happen at the next meeting, but the tone alone was enough to shift market expectations once again, this time back toward the possibility of tighter policy ahead. This sets up the moment this entire video has been building toward. On July 28th and 29th, the Federal Open Market Committee will meet again, with its decision scheduled for release on the afternoon of July 29th, followed by a press conference from Chair Warsh. Going into that meeting, market pricing based on tools like the CME FedWatch data has shown that most traders expect the Fed to hold rates steady in July, while the odds of a hike later in the year, particularly at the September meeting, have climbed noticeably higher. Picture the scene inside that press conference room. Reporters leaning forward, cameras rolling, waiting for a single sentence that could move billions of dollars in markets within seconds. That's not exaggeration. That's simply how modern monetary policy works in an era where every word from the Fed chair is parsed, analyzed, and traded on in real time. In a meeting like this one, where no change to the interest rate is widely expected, something interesting tends to happen. The actual decision often matters less than the tone. If Warsh signals genuine concern about inflation and hints strongly at a September hike, markets could react almost as if the hike had already happened. If he instead points to easing energy prices and a potential deal reducing tension around the Strait of Hormuz, investors may read that as room to wait longer before tightening further. Historically, meetings where the rate itself doesn't change still produce meaningful market swings in the hours that follow, concentrated heavily around the 30 minutes surrounding the chair's press conference. That's the part of July 29th that deserves your attention, arguably even more than the headline decision itself. Why should a family with no stock portfolio and no gold coins in a drawer care about any of this? Because the Federal Reserve's decisions ripple outward into nearly every corner of daily life. Mortgage rates, credit card interest, auto loans, and even the return on a simple savings account are all connected, directly or indirectly, to what happens in that room on July the 29th. Retirees living on fixed incomes feel it through the returns on their bonds. Small business owners feel it through the cost of borrowing to keep their operations running. Long-term savers feel it through how much their nest egg actually grows after accounting for inflation. This is not a story confined to Wall Street trading desks. It reaches the kitchen table. Picture a young couple checking mortgage rates before making an offer on their first home, watching the numbers shift slightly every time a Fed official gives a speech. Picture a retired school teacher glancing at a quarterly statement, trying to figure out why her fixed income investments suddenly look different than they did a year ago. Picture a small business owner in a hardware store, weighing whether now is the right time to take out a loan to expand, or whether it makes more sense to wait and see what happens at the end of July. None of these people are trading gold futures. All of them are affected by the same decision happening inside a conference room in Washington, D.C. Now, let's connect the two threads of this story, because on their own, each one is interesting. Together, they tell you something much bigger. On one side, you have central banks, led by China, buying gold aggressively and consistently, treating every price dip as an opportunity rather than a warning. On the other side, you have the Federal Reserve under new leadership, signaling a possible shift toward higher interest rates to fight inflation that refuses to fully cool down. These two forces are pulling in opposite directions. Central bank buying tends to support gold prices over the long run. Rising interest rate expectations tend to pressure gold prices in the short run. Which force wins depends on how the next several months unfold. Nobody, no analyst, no institution, no central bank itself, can say that with certainty. This is exactly why so many major financial institutions still hold surprisingly optimistic long-term views on gold, even after this year's sharp correction. UBS has pointed to continued central bank buying, the possibility of a weaker dollar over time, and the potential for eventual rate cuts as reasons gold could recover meaningfully over the next 12 to 18 months. Other major banks have offered similarly constructive outlooks, though forecasts like these should always be understood as informed estimates about an uncertain future, not guarantees. No analyst, however respected, can know exactly what gold will do next. Markets often surprise even the most experienced forecasters, and this year has already proven that point more than once. Here's a piece of historical context that puts this entire correction into perspective. Measured from its January peak, gold's pullback looks dramatic, roughly a quarter of its value erased in a matter of months. But measure it differently. Go back to January 2020, when gold traded near $1,560 an ounce. Even after this year's steep correction, gold sits more than 150% higher than it did just 6 years ago. Corrections like this one have happened before, even during gold's strongest long-term bull markets. And the World Gold Council has noted that pullbacks of comparable size have occurred multiple times over the same period in other major asset classes, including stocks. A sharp correction is not automatically evidence that a longer-term trend has ended. It's simply evidence that markets rarely move in a straight line. So why does this particular moment, this specific overlap of China's 20th month of buying and Warsh's Fed preparing for its next major decision, deserve to be called one of the biggest gold stories of the year? Because it captures, in a single snapshot, the exact tension defining the entire global financial system right now. Governments are quietly preparing for a world where trust in paper currency and government debt may not be as absolute as it once seemed, a trend reflected in years of central bank gold accumulation and ongoing discussions about reducing dependence on the US dollar in reserve holdings. At the same time, the world's most powerful central bank is trying to prove that it can still control inflation using the traditional tools of interest rate policy. Both of those stories are unfolding simultaneously, right now, in the same summer, around the same metal. What happens next depends on data most people will never read directly. It depends on whether June and July inflation reports show real cooling or another uncomfortable surprise. It depends on whether the situation around the Strait of Hormuz continues to ease or escalates again. It depends on whether Warsh's Federal Reserve holds steady in July only to raise rates in September, or whether cooling inflation gives policymakers room to wait longer. And it depends on whether China's central bank, along with dozens of others around the world, continues adding gold at its current pace, or whether this remarkable 20-month streak eventually slows. None of this should be treated as a prediction of where gold's price is headed next week or next month. Nobody watching this video, and nobody making this video, can promise that outcome, and anyone who claims certainty about short-term price movements in an environment this complex should be treated with healthy skepticism. What we can say, based on verified data rather than speculation, is that two of the most powerful forces in global finance, sovereign gold accumulation and central bank interest rate policy, are currently pulling gold in opposite directions at the same time, and the outcome of that tug of war will likely shape financial headlines for the rest of 2026. For everyday investors, workers building retirement savings, and families simply trying to protect their purchasing power, the lesson here isn't to panic, and it isn't to assume gold is guaranteed to rise or fall from here. It's to understand that behind every dramatic price swing on your phone screen, there are institutional decisions, some public, some quiet, that shape markets long before most people notice. The families and savers who benefit most from stories like this one aren't the ones who react emotionally to a single red or green candle on a chart. They're the ones who understand the structural forces underneath the surface and who make decisions based on understanding rather than fear. So, to answer the question this video opened with, the biggest gold move of the year may not be a single price spike or crash at all. It may be the quiet, disciplined 20-month buying pattern from the world's second largest economy, continuing right through gold's sharpest correction in over a decade, set against a Federal Reserve under new leadership preparing to make one of its most closely watched decisions of the year on July 29th. Two enormous forces, one heading toward long-term accumulation, the other toward short-term monetary discipline, both converging in the same summer, around the same metal, largely outside the headlines most people scroll past every single day. That's the story nobody was quite saying out loud. Now you have the full picture, built entirely on verified data and public record, not speculation and not hype. If you learned something new today, make sure to subscribe to Money Insights and like this video. More powerful financial insights are coming next.